There is a plant growing wild in every hedgerow in Europe, every roadside ditch in North America, and every garden you have ever passed without stopping. Boil its roots for 15 minutes. The water turns foamy without touching anything synthetic. It cleans wool without stripping its natural oils. It removes grease from skin without disrupting the acid balance that protects you from infection. It cleans delicate medieval fabrics so gently that conservators at major museums still use it today on textiles that would be destroyed by any modern cleaning product. Researchers even believe it was used to clean the most studied and controversial piece of fabric in human history. On the other side of the world, in the mountains of central Chile, the indigenous Mapuche people had a word in their language specifically for washing your hair with a completely different plant that works the exact same way. Not a general word for washing, a specific verb for that one act, with that one plant. The word is küllaytun. Two civilizations, on opposite sides of the earth, developed dedicated cleaning systems from plants that literally make their own soap. No factories, no petrochemicals, no plastic packaging. The chemistry was already there, growing out of the ground, waiting. Then, in 1917, Germany ran out of fat, and the world changed. Welcome to nature's lost vault. The archive opens in ancient Rome, where the Romans had a problem that every civilization has. People need to get clean, and wool needs to be processed before it becomes cloth. They solved both problems with the same plant, Saponaria officinalis. The name comes from the Latin word sapo, which means soap. They grew it around their public baths, not as decoration, but as infrastructure. Roman farmers washed their sheep with it before shearing. Roman textile workers used it to clean and thicken newly woven cloth. The plant was so embedded in the textile trade that it acquired a second name still used today, fuller's herb. The Romans did not discover it. They inherited it. Ancient Greeks before them called it catharsis for its purifying qualities. The knowledge spread across every civilization that had it and needed clean cloth, which was every civilization. In England during the Middle Ages, it grew deliberately near every woolen mill. Working families used it to wash their clothes and their pewter dishware. British colonists carried it deliberately to North America in their seed stocks because they knew they would desperately need it. It naturalized immediately and spread across the continent. It now grows wild from Maine to California. It has small pink flowers and a straight stem, and most people who see it have absolutely no idea what it is or what it can do. The most studied piece of fabric in human history is the Shroud of Turin, the controversial linen cloth bearing the image of a man that millions believe wrapped the body of Jesus Christ. Scientists have examined it for decades, debating its origin and how the image was made. One of the most significant findings came from Ray Rogers, a physical chemist on the 1978 scientific team permitted to examine the shroud directly. Rogers proposed that the cloth had been treated with soapwort extract during its original production. The treatment, he argued, explained one of the shroud's most puzzling features. The bloodstains appear red rather than the black or brown that dried blood normally becomes over centuries. Soapwort interacts with the hemoglobin in blood in a way that preserves the red coloration. The exact same property that made it the gentlest cleaner in the ancient world may have preserved the most debated artifact in Christian history. Museum conservators came to the same conclusion independently. The Victoria and Albert Museum in London uses soapwort extract to clean antique textiles. The same solution is believed to have been used on the Bayeux Tapestry, the massive 11th century embroidery documenting the Norman conquest of England. No synthetic detergent is safe enough for these objects. The plant that Roman workers grew beside their mills is still the only thing trusted with the most irreplaceable fabrics in Western civilization. Now cross the Atlantic and the equator, where in the mountains of central Chile, a large evergreen tree grows in the dry coastal scrub. The Mapuche people had been using it for personal hygiene for centuries before any European arrived. They peeled the inner bark from the branches and boiled it in river water. The bark froths immediately on contact with water like nothing else in nature. It does not require chemical rendering. It is simply bark and water. The tree's name in Mapuche is kullay. When a Jesuit naturalist officially documented the tree in 1782, he named it küllaytun saponaria. Both halves of that name mean the exact same thing. Küllaytun comes from the Mapuche word for soap. Saponaria comes from the Latin word for soap. The name was redundant because the property was undeniable. Every person who encountered this tree, in every language, arrived at the exact same description. In the late 1800s, European traders were exporting the bark extract to France and Britain, marketing it as a natural shampoo. Spanish colonial records from the 1600s describe indigenous people demonstrating how the bark foam cleans textiles, referring to the tree as the little soap tree. Two plants, one in every European hedgerow and one in the mountains of Chile, both doing the exact same thing, without any industrial process, with no synthetic chemistry, and with no supply chain more complex than bark, root, water, and fire. Now pay close attention, because this is where the story turns. In 1917, the Allied naval blockade cut Germany off from the fats and oils that traditional soap manufacturing required, and German chemists were forced to find a synthetic alternative. They did. The first synthetic detergent, a complex petroleum-derived chemical, was produced that year, not because it was better than soap, but because the war had made soap temporarily impossible. It was a wartime emergency solution, not a consumer product. The chemists who made it never claimed it was superior to what it replaced. They only claimed it was available. The war ended, and the emergency ended, but the synthetic detergents did not. An engineer named Robert Duncan traveled to Europe in the 1930s to study what those German chemists had developed. He returned to Procter & Gamble in the United States with the knowledge of synthetic surfactant chemistry. By 1946, his company had converted that knowledge into Tide. The massive factories that had been making aviation fuel during the Second World War were quietly converted to produce the chemical ingredients for household detergents. By 1953, sales of synthetic detergent had completely overtaken natural soap in the United States. The exact same factories that made fuel for warplanes in 1944 were making the detergent in your laundry room by 1947. Nobody asked if that was a good idea. Nobody compared it to what it was replacing. The infrastructure was already built, the factories needed a peacetime purpose, and the marketing was highly effective. Soapwort did not disappear because it failed. It disappeared because a world war created an industrial infrastructure that desperately needed civilian markets. A plant that grows in a ditch and costs nothing to harvest cannot support a billion-dollar factory. So the factory replaced the plant, and within a decade, most people in the developed world had completely forgotten the plant existed. The cost of that forgetting became visible slowly. It was measured in parts per billion in rivers, in collapsing fish populations, and in the detection of synthetic chemicals in human breast milk. Modern laundry detergents have improved since those early toxic formulations, but they are still synthetic. They are not the same as a plant that has been optimizing its chemistry for millions of years. Here is what that plant is doing that Tide cannot replicate. Soapwort's cleaning mechanism relies on saponins, natural molecules that form a stable foam in water and carry dirt away from fabric and skin. Without destroying the surface they are cleaning. Unlike synthetic detergents, they are fully biodegradable. They do not persist in water systems, and they do not bioaccumulate. They are gentle enough to clean the Shroud of Turin, which means they are gentle enough to clean human skin suffering from eczema or psoriasis. Boil the roots for 15 minutes, strain the liquid, and use it. That is the entire process. But the bark of the Chilean soap tree is chemically more complex. And here is where the story of this forgotten tree takes a turn that nobody anticipated. In 1974, a Danish researcher isolated a specific compound from the bark extract and discovered that it dramatically enhanced the human immune response to vaccines. That compound is now a key ingredient in the modern vaccine against shingles, used by more than 60 million people. It is in the malaria vaccine. It is in the Novavax COVID-19 vaccine. It has been evaluated in over 120 clinical trials involving 50,000 patients. It costs more than $100,000 per gram. The exact same molecule that made the Mapuche's hair clean for centuries is now being used to train the human immune system to recognize malaria. Nobody changed the molecule. The molecule was always there. What changed was that 60 years of pharmaceutical research finally caught up to what a mountain tree in Chile had been producing for millions of years. The scarcity of the bark and the complexity of the extraction process make it genuinely difficult to scale. Today, researchers at the John Innes Centre in the United Kingdom are mapping the complete biology of the common soapwort plant, theorizing that the humble hedgerow weed that cleaned medieval tapestries might eventually solve the global supply bottleneck for modern vaccine development. But you do not need a chemistry degree or a pharmaceutical supply chain to use it. Soapwort grows as a perennial in virtually any temperate climate. It returns every year from its root system without replanting. It spreads steadily and requires no care once established. A small patch produces enough root material for household cleaning indefinitely. The exact same liquid that museum conservators use to clean priceless medieval textiles will clean your laundry, your hair, and your skin, with no synthetic chemistry, no plastic packaging, and no cost beyond the water and the time to boil the roots. They were both called soap, both named for what they did, both used by every civilization that encountered them, and both replaced not because something better was found, but because a war created a chemical industry that needed markets, and nobody bothered to make the comparison. The comparison is available now: a seed packet, a root cutting, 15 minutes with boiling water. The global detergent industry is worth more than $200 billion annually. The plants it replaced grow in your hedgerow for free. If this vault changed how you see the products in your own home, do not let this knowledge disappear again. Subscribe to Nature's Lost Vault and hit the notification bell. Every like and every share bypasses the algorithm to preserve what they tried to erase. The next vault opens soon.